In the book of Matthew, chapter 24, as Jesus was describing signs of the times to the disciples, at least 4 times in that chapter, he described deception that will take place, false prophets, false teachers that will arise. When we compare Matthew 24 with also Revelation chapter 13, verse 13 and verse 14, which describes apostate Protestantism, verse 14 tells us, and verse 13 speaks of the miracles that apostate Protestantism will do in the sight of the beast to deceive the majority and to cause the majority to form the image of the beast. Now, in Revelation chapter 16, the Bible describes the 3 unclean spirits like frogs that will come against God's people. It says it this way, verse 13, "And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet." The mouth of the beast there, that is the same power that Revelation chapter 13 describes as the second beast, which is none other than apostate Protestantism. Again, the warning that Jesus gave in the book of Matthew chapter 24, part of the signs of the times, was false prophets that would arise in the last days to deceive many. Notice what Spirit of Prophecy tells us here. In these days of peril, we are not to accept everything that men bring to us as truth, as professed teachers from God come to us declaring that they have a message from God. It is proper to inquire carefully, how do we know that this is truth? Jesus has told us that false prophets shall arise and shall deceive many, but we need not be deceived. For the word of God gives us a test whereby we may know what is truth. The prophet says, to the law and to the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. That is Isaiah 8:20. Just like the Bereans, we need to check all things based on what we just read here. But notice this article with me. This is from HuffPost, January 7, 2020. Jim Bakker told Christians, he said, you must love Trump to prove you are saved. So in order to make it to the kingdom, we must love and support Donald Trump. This is what this pastor, this person is telling us here. But notice carefully, back to the screen. Bakker, a staunch Trump supporter who previously said impeachment would lead to a civil war, said it was no joke. In recent years, he's returned to TV to make doomsday predictions while selling his supporters buckets of freeze-dried food and other supplies to use during the end times. In other words, what they just described to us here about Jim Bakker, this man is a false prophet. And again, we should expect many of these false prophets to arise as Christ described prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. But also keep in mind, in Revelation chapter 13, again, as I made reference to a moment ago, verse 14 tells us, "And he deceiveth them which dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which he had the wound by a sword and did live." And these evangelicals, this is exactly what they are fulfilling here. The image of the beast, church and state together. This man is clearly a false prophet. But what is more dangerous for God's people, for the remnant of the seed of God's people, is when we are not able to discern the false prophet in among us. Now, this is a false prophet on the outside of the remnant church, of the seed of the woman. But what about the remnant or the false prophets from within? We have such thing even among us as Present Truth Ministries. We have this type of false prophets, false teachers among us, because keep in mind, the Bible also says, again says, to the law and to the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. The Bible also tells us that if a person comes to you to claim that they are a prophet of the Lord, if whatever they prophesied does not come to pass, know therefore that the Lord did not send that person. And we have such person among us who has been prophesying about the death of some pastors, even some of the sermon titled Death of 3 Pastors. And this person has hatred in his heart for a particular self-supported pastor. And now how can you have a ministry and call yourself a quote-unquote pastor, and yet you have hatred in your heart against somebody else? And that person has been prophesying so many times, falsely prophesying about the death of the other pastor who is going to die, and none of that is taking place. This is very dangerous among us. Notice the video here of Jim Bakker now telling this.
You know what? Trump is a test whether you're even saved. Only saved people can love Trump. Only saved people can love Trump.
So in order to make it to heaven, we must form the image of the beast. That's basically what this pastor and Paula White and many others are pushing. They said Trump was an anointed of God. If you are against Trump, then you're going to lose your salvation. Notice carefully with me what these men are really selling. Notice this evangelical prayer coin. Grieved is what the age of Trump is all about. Notice next from Daily News. Televangelist, who again? Jim Bakker, sells $45 Trump coin, calls it point of contact with what? With God. Now they have introduced or made this coin. They are selling for what again? $45. It is the point of contact with God. So you need that in order to have a relationship with God. Watch the video.
How many of you have been praying all across America? How many of you have been praying? This coin is our point of contact. When I asked the Lord why the coin, the Lord said, because when you take the coin, it's a point of contact. So your faith is being released with 1 million other believers to pray protection and peace and wisdom and counsel over the President of the United States and over his family. That's our point of contact every day. When you see it, remember, God puts something in your hand that you have a role in. That's why we've got to pray, because they think we're crazy, but we're actually the sane ones.
Right. That's right.
And so we're praying, we're going to pray. The teaching that is here, this coin as a point of contact, this 24-karat gold-plated coin. And by the way, I couldn't copy the Sanhedrin model. I told them I would do an original. So we found a nicer picture of the president to use. So we have our own version of it. We need to be praying now and not captive to gloom or anxiety or fear, but channeling our optimism in the direction of God's begun a miracle. Let's keep that miracle going.
This reminds me of 2 Peter. Go to the book of 2 Peter with me. 2 Peter chapter 2. It reminds me of what Peter says here. In the last days, these false prophets who are in the business of making money, and that's the reason why they are calling themselves pastors, and that's what they are exactly doing in the last days. Notice what Peter says, verse 1 of 2 Peter chapter 2. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 1. But there were false prophets also among the people, even as there shall be false teachers among you, who privily shall bring in damnable heresies, even denying the Lord that bought them, and bring upon themselves swift destruction. And many shall follow their pernicious ways, by reason of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken of. But notice verse 3. And through covetousness, through what? Covetousness, shall they with vain words make what? Merchandise of you, whose judgment now of a long time lingereth not, and the damnation slumbereth not. They will do what? Make merchandise of you. That's exactly what Jim Bakker was selling here, making merchandise of the vulnerable ones, those who are not really studying the Bibles for themselves. And again, that's the same thing we see happening among us, making merchandise of God's people. Anyone who claimed to be a prophet in these last days and prophesying falsely is not only a false prophet, but it also trying to make merchandise of God's people in the last days. Notice carefully with me what Spirit of Prophecy tells us here. I would say to our dear brethren who have been so eager to accept everything that came in the form of visions and dreams, beware that you be not ensnared. Read the warnings that have been given by the world's Redeemer to his disciples, to be given again by them to the world. The word of God is solid rock, and we may plant our feet securely upon it. Every soul must needs to be tested. Every faith and doctrine must needs be tried by the law and the testimony. Take heed that no man deceive you. The warnings of Christ on this matter are needed at this time, for delusions and deceptions will come in among us and will multiply as we near the end. So delusions and deceptions will come in among who? Among us. So this is not Jim Bakker on the outside. This is happening among us. Again, let us be like the Bereans and ask for a thus saith the Lord, and open up the scriptures for ourselves. Again, if any man come unto you and they said they have a vision, a dream from the Lord, and if that vision does not come to pass, that person is a false prophet, and we were told that we need to stay away from them. Part of the signs of the times. May God keep us vigilant. May God give us the boldness, the discernment to be able to see the wolves among the sheep. God bless you.